The Knox Twins didn't just play college football, they redefined it. 4 long years, a Heisman showdown, and a national championship face-off that only crowned one of them. And when it was over, the sport had never seen anything like it. But that chapter is closed, and now the next one is calling. For Marcus, he comes in as the most dominant linebacker prospect the sport had ever produced. Not just athletic, but suffocating. The kind of player teams would trade everything away just to draft. And then there's Jalen, who won the Heisman over his brother, then watched him take home the one thing that mattered even more. He was never the headliner, but spent 4 years in that shadow, quietly building something the league hasn't seen yet. Same blood, same name, and now for the first time, the NFL gets to decide what each of them is actually worth. College tested them, but the NFL is where legacies are made, or go to die. The national title parade had ended, the media cooled off, and the Twins got back to work. The NFL Combine was only days away, the moment everything in their lives had been building toward. The two sat down separately with the family agent, and when Jalen's turn came, his future stopped looking as certain as he'd once imagined. His academic suspension from senior year, the one that cost him 3 games and nearly Washington's entire season, had followed him into every front office conversation. And suddenly, his Heisman Award wasn't leading the story anymore. His off-field decisions were. His agent didn't sugarcoat anything. His image had taken a serious hit, and now there were only 2 things that could actually save him: an impressive combine and acing the interviews. And for a moment, Jalen sat with it. 4 years of work, and it had all come down to this. Combine day arrived, and the running backs were the first on the field, and as Jalen walked into Lucas Oil Stadium, he could feel the pressure mounting. A silent building, packed with scouts and prospects, all fighting for the same thing. The 40-yard dash came first, and Jalen felt ready. He'd been putting up sharp times all off-season, but when it finally counted, he stumbled out of the break and never fully recovered, crossing the line with a 4.86 time. Scouts scribbled notes, and quiet murmurs broke the silence in the arena. Jalen walked back frustrated and reset for one final attempt. He dug his cleats into the turf, opened his stride, and ran like everything depended on it, racing through the line at a 4.41 time. Not elite speed by any means, but far from the slowest. From there, he moved on to the bench press, a drill he genuinely felt confident in. He put up 24 reps, showing his strength was, well, strength. The rest of the drills were solid without being anything spectacular, and suddenly his Heisman title was doing a lot of the heavy lifting. It was already a day Jalen wanted back, but the combine itself was only half of it. The interview gauntlet started, and from the moment he sat down, his worst fear came to life. GMs didn't ask about how he won the Heisman or about his leadership. They didn't ask about his film or what he did to opposing defenses for 4 years. Every conversation came back to the same thing.
So tell me, Jalen, is it immaturity?
Why couldn't you handle your responsibilities?
Help me understand the suspension.
Jalen did his best to hold it together, to answer every question professionally, but by the end of it, he felt stripped bare, like 4 years of hard work had been reduced to one mistake, and nobody in any room cared about anything else. Afterwards, he found Marcus, and for the first time, expressed exactly how he felt, how he feared he'd blown his shot before it even came. Marcus listened, and when Jalen was finished, he looked him in the eyes and assured him everything would work out, and that the right team will call his name. Marcus, meanwhile, was living a completely different experience. While Jalen was fighting to hold his draft stock together, Marcus sat untouched at the top of every board. His agent had actually discouraged him from even attending the combine. After all, his stock couldn't climb any higher. But Marcus wanted to go anyway, not for his stock, but to make a statement. The moment he took the field, the entire stadium perked up, and Marcus didn't just perform, he exploded, breezing to a 4.33 in the 40, the fastest time ever recorded by a linebacker. And while every other prospect in his position was either fast or strong, Marcus was both, throwing up 25 reps on the bench press without even breaking a sweat. With every drill, the same thought kept forming in every scout's mind. There wasn't a single flaw to his game. Marcus was the kind of prospect that comes around once in a lifetime if you're lucky. The whispers about the #1 overall pick got louder and louder with every rep. Even through the interviews, he was everything teams wanted, confident, composed, and answering every question like a seasoned pro. Until his very last meeting, when one question caught him off guard.
Tell me about your brother.
For a split second, Marcus froze, and then answered honestly. Look, Jalen is the hardest worker I've ever known. He plays with a level of heart and intensity you can't measure. He pushes me every single day to be better, and whatever team calls his name will be glad they did. The GM just nodded slowly and said nothing else. And right then, Marcus thought about it. The odds of him and Jalen actually landing on the same team were almost non-existent. The league just didn't work that way. The lights at Lucas Oil Stadium turned off, the scouts packed up, and the Twins went home to wait. 2 brothers, 2 completely different futures hanging in the balance. And before long, the event every young athlete dreams of had arrived, the NFL Draft. For Marcus, it felt like he was walking into his own coronation, but for Jalen, not as much. As the two arrived, Marcus noticed his brother had gone quiet. "What's wrong, man? Our dreams are about to come true." Jalen didn't even crack a smile. "Marcus, there's no guarantee I hear my name tonight. For all I know, I'm just sitting there with a camera in my face while every team passes me by." Marcus's support didn't waver. "You'll be off the board tonight, I promise." And it wasn't long into the night before Marcus's phone rang.
With the second pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the Carolina Panthers select Marcus Knox.
Marcus patted Jalen on the back and made his way to the stage, soaking in everything the moment had to offer. The crowd was deafening, the lights were bright, and Roger Goodell was there waiting, arms wide open. Cameras flashed as the nation's top prospect smiled for the fans. But as Marcus soaked up all the love, Jalen sat waiting. Pick after pick, running back needy teams passed him by. The camera kept finding his face, and the story of the night had quietly shifted to, how far will Jalen Knox slide? He was already mentally preparing for day 2 when...
All right, pick 23 still on the clock. Hold on, we have a trade. Yeah, we've got a trade.
Someone's coming back into the
Seconds
first round.
ago, league just approved it. We don't have the details yet, but a team has launched back into round 1.
At 17th overall, Jalen's phone rang.
Jalen, it's Carolina. We're on the clock. Look, we've been eyeing you for some time. We believe in what you can bring to this team. Are you ready to be a Panther too?
Jalen couldn't find any words.
All right, I'll take that as a yes.
He walked across that stage in a daze, cameras flashing, fans screaming, everything about that moment felt like a dream. But when he saw his name stitched across that jersey, felt the fabric in his hands for the first time, he knew. This was real. The Carolina Panthers had done something the league had never seen. In a single draft, they secured a generational defender and a Heisman winning back, one on each side of the ball. 2 franchise cornerstones. And for the first time since high school, the Knox Twins were back on the same sideline. As Jalen stood on the stage, Marcus didn't wait, racing back out there, and the two embraced the way only two brothers can. They stood there side by side, hands raised, as a new overwhelming feeling began to grow. The NFL would never be the same again. The weeks following the draft were a blur. Marcus was eager to get to work while Jalen soaked in every moment, and honestly, part of him still believed he didn't deserve all this. The Twins touched down in Charlotte, signed their first ever contracts, and officially entered the world of professional football. When the two finally saw their own names above their lockers, they just stood and stared, not wanting to move. 4 brutal years that pushed both of them to their absolute limits, and it had all led to this. From meeting the locker room, to getting fitted by the equipment staff, to finally suiting up for training camp, it was all moving faster than either of them had expected. And from the very first rep, Marcus looked exactly like the scouting reports said he would. Fast, violent, flying all over the field. Watching his 2 shiny new rookies in action, Coach Canales had a light bulb moment. If these two are going to be the future of this franchise, let's see what they're really made of. Brother versus brother on every rep. Marcus rose to the challenge and wasn't easing up, but Jalen wasn't backing down either. Sometimes Marcus won, and sometimes Jalen made him look silly. The coaching staff looked on, picturing every possibility at hand, watching iron sharpen iron. For the Twins, everything was trending in the right direction. The fan base was bought in, the organization was excited, and the new era in Carolina felt like it was already underway. Well, almost everyone bought in. Rico Dowdle hadn't signed with Carolina to be anybody's backup, and when he finally got in front of Coach Canales, he made that clear.
I signed here to be RB1 and you trade up for that guy?
Nothing has been decided yet. If you want the job, go take it. Get out there and prove you're the better back.
Before long, training camp concluded and preseason had officially arrived. Fully dressed in their Panther threads for the first time, in a real game, the Twins took the field ready to take their first NFL snaps. Marcus had already solidified his spot on the depth chart, and Jalen knew his was still very much up in the air. The offense took the field first, and Jalen's number was called. He got the ball on his first carry and ran straight into Myles Garrett. No easing into it, just the best pass rusher on the planet, introducing Jalen to the league at full speed. Then it was the defense's turn, and the nation was waiting to get its first real look at Marcus Knox. And from his very first snap, he proved he was worth every bit of that second overall pick, meeting Quinshon Judkins in the gap, delivering a hit that echoed through the stadium. But then came a moment that reminded everyone he was still a rookie. Late in the drive, Marcus read the play wrong. It was a step too slow to the edge. Judkins turned the corner and walked into the end zone untouched. Marcus clenched his fist in anger. Even now, and even with a player like him, there was still going to be a learning curve. The Twins didn't see much action outside of a handful of drives, but what they definitely didn't want to see was Rico Dowdle ripping off a 70-yard touchdown run, widening the gap between Jalen and that RB1 role. The following week, the Panthers traveled to Houston, and the whole way there, Jalen thought about the kind of day he needed to have. Dowdle was the proven veteran, and all throughout camp, he looked every bit the part. Jalen needed something, anything, to swing some momentum his way. When his opportunity came, he took a carry to the edge, cut upfield, and didn't stop until he turned it into a 46-yard gain. Exactly the kind of spark the coaching staff had been waiting to see. But Jalen was quickly learning how unforgiving this league was. A few drives later, he took a hit he didn't see coming and lost the football. Just like that, everything he'd built in that game was gone. on. He stormed to the sideline, dazed and frustrated, and once again, it was his brother who answered. Marcus came screaming through the line on the very next drive, leaving CJ Stroud looking like a deer in headlights. Marcus Knox had his first sack as a pro, and Jalen looked on from the sideline feeling like he was right back in high school, watching his brother make up for his mistakes all over again. There was only 1 week left to show Coach Canales and the entire Carolina fanbase that trading up for him was worth it. With only a handful of reps left, every carry mattered. Right on cue, Jalen broke into the second level and outran both safeties on his way to his first ever NFL touchdown. And for a split second, he'd reminded everyone exactly how he won the Heisman and why he might just be this team's RB1 after all. But while Jalen caught his breath on the sideline, he saw firsthand the shape this team was actually in. Bryce Young, a quarterback the league still hadn't made up its mind about, threw an ugly interception, one that should have never left his hand. The Twins glanced at each other, both realizing for the first time exactly how steep the climb ahead was going to be. The offense had serious work to do, but Marcus was determined to carry more than his weight on the other side of the ball, and made that clear flying downhill for his second sack in 2 weeks. And even though a 42-year-old Rodgers was taking snaps in the preseason, Marcus didn't discriminate. Just like that, preseason was in the books. The Carolina fanbase was starving for something to believe in, and after draft night, they decided that anything short of a postseason push was unacceptable. The expectations were real, and nobody carried them more than the Twins. Rosters were trimmed, depth charts were finalized, but ahead of week one position was still unsettled. Coach called for Jalen, and as he walked into that office, he could feel his chest tighten.
Jalen, we're going to roll with Rico as our RB1, but we expect you to be ready when your number is called. Keep your head up and keep working.
Jalen was disappointed, but told Coach he was there to compete. In the hallway, Marcus was waiting, ready to celebrate or console, whichever the situation called for. And when he heard the news, he expected his brother to be crushed. But Jalen was surprisingly optimistic. You know, he just told you you're the backup, right? Please, I've been climbing depth charts my whole life. This isn't anything new. Just gotta keep working. Marcus looked at his brother for a moment and nodded. With their feet officially wet and the entire league waiting to see what the Knox Twins were truly capable of, it was time to find out what they could do when it actually counted.
It's a rainy one here in Jacksonville as we prepare to kick off the NFL season. And I don't think there are two players with more eyes on them than these two rookies, or, as they're better known, the Knox Twins.
Boy, you said it, Phil. With the addition of Marcus Knox, this Carolina defense has all the tools to do a complete 180 and find their place among the top units in the league.
Week 1 was officially here, and the feeling in the air was unlike anything the two had ever experienced. Not even the national championship felt like this. Jalen grabbed his clipboard and found a comfy spot on the bench, while Marcus and the defense were the first on the field. From the opening drive, Marcus could feel it. The NFL was faster than anything he'd prepared for. Routes he'd been able to cover in college developed before he could think. Trevor Lawrence took full advantage, and the rain wasn't making anything easier. At the goal line, he misread the play entirely, letting Etienne walk in untouched for 6. Marcus hit the sideline hard, and when Jalen reached out to grab his shoulder, he pulled away without a word. No acknowledgement, just his helmet coming off and his eyes fixed on the field. Meanwhile, the offense without Jalen in the lineup looked decent enough. Rico Dowdle was comfortable with the ball in his hands, stringing together strong runs with ease. Jalen could only sit and watch, clipboard in his lap, just waiting. Then, a few drives later, Coach tossed him out there, unexpected but not unwelcome. On his first real snap, it's a play-action fake and a huge gain up the sideline to Jalen, a genuine spark, and he was already running back toward the huddle when Coach waved him back to the sideline. One snap, that was it. Jalen jogged back, finding his spot on the bench once again. The rest of the afternoon belonged to Jacksonville. Even in the moments Marcus found some form of impact, it wasn't enough to change the tide. And before either of them knew it, the Twins had lost their NFL debut. The flight back to Charlotte was quiet. Nobody said much, and Marcus sat with his headphones in, replaying every snap in his head. Every missed read, every step he was late on, he'd put the blame squarely on himself. It was nowhere near the standard he'd always held for himself. In week 2, the Panthers were on the road again, this time to Arizona for what was hopefully a more manageable opponent. Marcus, still reeling from week 1, was hunting redemption. Carolina opened the game with a score and out-trotted Marcus and the defense. And on the very first play, Marvin Harrison flew right past a sleeping secondary on the other side of the field for a long touchdown. Marcus didn't wait for the coaches to say anything. On the sideline, he gathered the unit and firmly said, "That can't happen again. We're better than that." And nobody argued. He was a rookie talking to veterans, but he made sure to back it up. On the next series, Marcus read Kyler's eyes from the snap, jumped the route, and snagged the pass right out of the air. His first NFL interception, and that's how it's done. But despite him single-handedly shifting the game's momentum, the secondary got burned again on the very next drive. Michael Wilson strolled in for another Cardinal touchdown, and Marcus just shook his head. He kept the pressure on, forcing Kyler out of the pocket, making his presence felt on every snap, but in the middle of it all, something became clear to him. One linebacker couldn't fix an entire defense. He couldn't be everywhere at once. Somewhere or another, the people around him needed to want it too. Panthers fall to 0-2, and Marcus couldn't hide his frustration. This wasn't Bama anymore, and Carolina weren't picking second overall for no reason. He had an entire defense to whip into shape, and starting in an 0-2 hole meant there was no time to waste. Back in Charlotte, Jalen could feel the tension practically spilling out of his brother. Hey, might want to take it easy on those reps. You're no good to the team if you tear something. Yeah, well, I'm no good to the team now. Marcus, come on. It's been 2 games, and we're rookies. Did you really not expect any growing pains? Marcus didn't answer, and just moved on to the next set. Whatever, I gotta go. Coach wanted to see me about something. Jalen made his way to Coach's office, not really sure what to expect. You wanted to see me, Coach?
Yeah, look, I'll make this quick. 0-2 isn't the start we'd hoped for, so we're shaking things up this week. You're getting the start. Don't let me down.
Jalen walked out of that office a different person than he walked in. 3 weeks ago, he was a backup with a clipboard, and now the door was wide open. The only question was whether or not he could actually walk through it. Jalen's first start was coming in the Panthers' home opener, a division showdown. The entire Carolina fanbase was behind him, and everyone was crossing their fingers, hoping that Jalen Knox was the missing piece this offense had been waiting for. Coach Canales wasted no time getting him involved. A quick screen on the first drive that, for a moment, looked like a dud, but Jalen shrugged off a defender in the open field and raced for the sticks, picking up a fresh set of downs. From there, he took a handoff to the edge, turned upfield, and rumbled forward for a 20-yard pickup. Bank of America Stadium had never been this loud, and the entire Panther sideline, Marcus included, was beaming. The OC stayed riding the hot hand, dialing up another screen, and this time, Jalen weaved through Falcon defenders before finding pay dirt for his first official touchdown of the regular season. He stood in that end zone, letting the roar of the crowd wash over him, and as the fans got louder, the voice that had been quietly telling him he didn't deserve this began to fade away. Marcus dapped him up on the sideline, and now it was time for the defense to go to work. Marcus built on the momentum his brother had created, flying all over the field, playing disciplined, fast, violent football, then getting after Michael Penix for his first sack of the day. Everything seemed to be clicking. Everything except Bryce Young. After an ugly interception and holding onto the ball way too long, drives began dying one after another. On the sideline, Marcus watched what was supposed to be this team's leader literally throw away everything the defense had been building. With under a minute to play, Jalen answered the call, willing the offense down the field into field goal range, where the kick split the uprights and Carolina escaped with a razor-thin 1-point victory. It was ugly, but 1-2 sounds a whole lot better than 0-3. On the field, the Twins celebrated, Jalen riding the high of his first ever start, and Marcus genuinely proud of the strides this defense had taken after their abysmal performance a week ago. And Coach Canales hit the podium knowing exactly who to thank.
I think we all know who's responsible for the win out there today, Jalen and Marcus Knox. They're the face of Panther football.
And he was right. The Twins had the entire city behind them. It was only one win early in the season, but it felt like the start of something greater. Only it wasn't. The following week against New England, the defense was finally finding its footing. Marcus was stuffing the run with ease, and the secondary was playing lights out, generating turnovers. Jalen continued to shine, building on his previous performance and making a strong case to remain this team's RB1. But you can't hand the ball to one guy every single play and expect results. Sooner or later, it'll start to give. And when the ball wasn't in Jalen's hands, things got ugly fast. Bryce forced another interception, and when the offense took the field again, New England sold out for the run, taking away the only thing that was working for Carolina. Now forced to air it out, Bryce held the ball too long and took an ugly sack. Jalen picked up his quarterback, patted him on the helmet, trying to turn the tide, but it was too late. Carolina dropped another game, falling to 1-3. Afterward, the locker room was dead silent, and that wasn't even the worst part. When Coach faced the media with Bryce at his side, the room didn't hold back.
Are you considering benching Bryce after tonight?
Coach, do you regret passing on a quarterback in the draft for the Knox Twins?
What's this team ceiling with Bryce at the helm, do you think?
Is there a timetable if you do make a change?
Coach Canales didn't have convincing answers for any of it, and on the way out, a reporter caught Marcus before he left the locker room.
Marcus, what does this offense need right now?
We need more from certain members of this team. That's all I'm gonna say. And later, behind closed doors, Marcus voiced exactly what he was feeling. He'd seen this movie before, a powerful defense carrying a broken offense on his back game after game until the season quietly slipped away. He lived it at Alabama, he wasn't about to live it here. You can't win games when the guy under center just gives them away. That's not an opinion, that's just facts. But Jalen wasn't having it. It's week 4, Marcus, we're still figuring this offense out, and you want to throw him overboard before he's even had a real chance. I want to win, that's what I want. And you think tearing down your own quarterback gets you there. Marcus didn't answer. Jalen knew exactly where he stood. These were the same twins, with the same fire that had defined their entire lives. They weren't rivals anymore, but the edge between them hadn't gone anywhere. And later that night, Jalen found Bryce in the film room, alone and defeated. He sat down next to him and offered some much-needed words of encouragement. Jalen had been the guy everyone was ready to move on from. He knew exactly what it felt like. He urged Bryce to let it roll off his back, but he was struggling to let go of Marcus's words. And that's when Jalen assured him, "Don't worry about any of that. I'll take care of my brother." Carolina sat at 1-3, not completely dead, but certainly not alive either. Analysts everywhere were checking out, and the consensus was forming fast. Not even the Knox Twins could fix this franchise. The locker room was struggling to block out the noise, and the hope this team had carried since draft night was vanishing as quickly as it came. Ahead of their next game, both Twins knew what was at stake. Another loss, and the season would likely unravel for good. Both were in agreement. They needed a statement win. But early on, the Dolphins knew exactly what to expect from the Carolina offense. Their first drive ended quickly, then on defense, Marcus and his unit had no answers for Tua, who was carving up the secondary almost effortlessly. They recovered and managed to hold Miami to a field goal, but on offense, the struggles weren't going anywhere. Things appeared to be heading toward another underwhelming afternoon, until Jalen Knox cracked the game wide open. With under 30 seconds left before halftime, he snagged a pass over the middle and fought his way to the 1-yard line. Then he punched it in, giving the Panthers the momentum they desperately needed heading into the break. But he wasn't finished there. Jalen opened the second half, ripping off a ridiculous 54-yard run. Then, a few beautiful blocks later, he was standing in the end zone again. Carolina had life. But on the sideline, Marcus wasn't satisfied, not even close. He knew better than to trust a lead. He blanketed Dolphin receivers, then came screaming downhill and buried Tua just as he got the ball away. And for the first time all season, it felt like Carolina had firm control of a football game. Until they didn't. Back on offense, Bryce overlooked a wide open Jalen in the flats and gifted an easy interception to the Dolphin defense. Jalen jogged to the sideline and Marcus was already looking at him. How many times? Marcus, not now. How many times is he going to give the game away before you stop making excuses for him? I'm not making excuses. I'm trying to hold this team together, but you running your mouth like you've been doing just makes that a whole lot harder. Yeah, well, I meant every word of it. And you think that's helping? We're supposed to be leaders here, or did you forget that? Yeah, well, I don't think losing exactly helps us either. Neither of them had anything left to say. When Marcus hit the field, he didn't look back. He opened the series with a massive TFL, then followed it up by crushing Tua in the backfield for a sack. But he wasn't done. With a minute left and the Dolphins threatening to tie it, Marcus read Tua like a book, jumping and snatching the ball clean out of the air. It was already enough to ice the game, but Marcus wanted more. 90 yards later, Marcus Knox was standing in the end zone with his first ever NFL touchdown. The stadium fell silent, except for the handful of Panther fans who'd made the trip to Miami. Carolina escaped Hard Rock Stadium with a statement win, and where their two rookies didn't just flash, they'd taken over. And afterward, Coach Canales hit the podium beaming. When the questions started to roll in, the media began singing a completely different tune.
Coach, what do you say to fans who think this team can make a run?
Over here on the left, what do the Knox Twins mean to your future?
Coach, other teams are saying you won the lottery for landing both twins. Your thoughts on that?
The narrative had shifted overnight, and the Knox Twins were taking the league by storm. The entire city of Charlotte was celebrating, but somewhere in the middle of it all, Marcus and Jalen Knox stood on the same sideline, further apart than they'd ever been. The tension between them was quickly spilling onto the practice field. The same fire they carried into every Sunday was showing up in every rep. Teammates and coaches could see exactly what was happening, but nobody wanted to get in the middle of it. Maybe this was their way of working things out. Nobody had seen this level of competitiveness between them since the national championship. And even though they were keeping their distance in the facility and coming for each other's throats in practice, their production on the field didn't falter. If anything, the constant one-upping kept Carolina competitive. They rolled over Dallas in dominating fashion, but if you watched closely enough, you could see it wasn't a celebration. It was a competition. Every Jalen touchdown was answered by a Marcus sack, and every Marcus sack was answered by another Jalen touchdown. And by the end of it, the two of them left Cowboy fans questioning if it truly was their year. Carolina clawed their way back to 500, and suddenly the outside world had a new narrative. The Knox Twins are the Panthers. But not everyone was celebrating. The veterans had been watching, quietly at first, until one of them said what everyone was thinking.
I've been in this league 5 years, and this week, I didn't get a single question that wasn't about those two.
And nobody disagreed. It didn't matter how long they'd been grinding in this league, two shiny rookies show up, and suddenly, Carolina was a two-man operation. Every headline, every interview, every highlight package was a Jalen touchdown or a Marcus sack. Coach urged the Twins to ride it out and told them that resistance was part of the process. But the resistance was just getting started. Because even with the Twins playing at an elite level, the rest of the team was quietly checking out. Bryce continued to struggle, and after falling to the Bills, it felt like Carolina had been fully exposed. The locker room tightened, side eyes, whispered conversations, the whole vibe had shifted. Marcus could feel it, and even though things were still rocky between him and Jalen, he knew it wasn't worth continuing to lose over. He tried to close the gap, reached out, and left the door wide open, but somewhere in the weeks they'd spent apart, Jalen had built something with Bryce that Marcus hadn't been a part of. The two of them had their own bond now, and walking into that from the outside felt strange, which left Marcus exactly where he'd never expect to find himself: alone. In a building full of people, teammates, coaches, and staff, Marcus Knox had never felt more isolated. The vets didn't talk to him unless they had to, the younger guys kept their distance, and even the coaches who praised him publicly every week treated him less like a person and more like a weapon to be pointed in the right direction. He was too good to be ignored, too intense to be approached, and the space between was a very lonely place to live. He'd been feared before, but in college, on the field, that fear was a weapon. But this wasn't opponents afraid of what he'd do to them on Sundays, this was his own locker room, his own teammates. But rather than sitting in that place and letting it consume him, he reminded himself of the one job he had to do. Carolina was 3-5, and he wasn't about to let his first season in the league be a forgotten one. When the team traveled to Lambeau, everyone circled Carolina as easy underdogs. Marcus had never really been called that before, and honestly, he didn't care for it. The defense hit the field first, and from the very first snap, Marcus made his intentions clear. On 1st and goal, he shot the gap and buried Josh Jacobs behind the line before he could even blink. Then on 2nd down, when Green Bay tried to get away from 43, Marcus sniffed out the screen and flew downfield to blow it up before it ever had a chance to develop. But even Marcus Knox couldn't plug every hole forever. One run bounced to the outside and Green Bay was on the board first. He hit that sideline furious and was met with a wall of side eyes from the veterans. But the next time he took the field, Marcus was hunting. And when Green Bay realized they couldn't run at him, they quickly changed their approach. But Marcus was there too, crushing Matthew Golden and blasting the ball loose in the process. He scooped it up himself and suddenly the Panthers had life. He half expected the offense to waste it, but when he looked out onto the field, he saw Jalen sidestep the blitz and burst forward for a 50-yard pickup, bringing Carolina deep into Packer territory. And then, something Marcus didn't see coming. Bryce Young dropped a dot into the end zone to give the Panthers the lead, but Green Bay answered. Jordan Love found his receiver, and they tied it right back up. Then Jalen marched the offense the length of the field and put Carolina right back on top. Back and forth we go, with neither team willing to give it up. Late in the 4th quarter, Love dropped a bomb down the middle of the field, moving Green Bay into Panther territory. Josh Jacobs capped off the drive with a powerful touchdown run, and Marcus once again looked to his brother for the answer. Jalen and Bryce took the field together, and with 30 seconds left, they put their chemistry on full display, connecting in the flats for a walk-in touchdown. The sideline erupted, and everyone was prepping for overtime. Marcus took the field and made the kind of crucial rookie mistake he'd avoided all season. With under 20 seconds left in regulation, he sat underneath, expecting the quick throw, but instead, Jordan Love went deep, pushing the Packers into prime position. Green Bay lined up and drilled the game-winning field goal as time expired. And just like that, the Panthers left Lambeau with a heartbreaking loss. The locker room afterward was different from every other loss this season. The veterans were done being quiet, done watching the coach praise the Twins while the team kept losing, done pretending their spotlight wasn't blinding. If Marcus and Jalen wanted to act like leaders, they needed to start playing like it, and that meant owning losses, not just highlights. Every missed assignment, every blown coverage got scrutinized. The temperature in that room was unlike anything the Twins had felt since they arrived in Charlotte. The locker room emptied slowly, everyone heading for the buses, and Marcus sat alone at his locker. All things considered, he played a hell of a game today, made plays that would be on highlight reels by morning, but here he was, alone. He was still sitting there when he heard footsteps coming toward him. Jalen sat a Gatorade down next to him, patted him on the shoulder, and headed for the exit. And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, both of them felt exactly the same thing. They weren't just trying to carry a team anymore. They were trying to carry a locker room that was ready to turn on them. At 3-6, morale was at an all-time low. The back half of the schedule was the toughest stretch yet, and if something didn't change soon, the season was going to slip away. Then it was Jalen who found Marcus in the weight room. After watching him for a moment, he approached and was the first to break the ice. "You trying to get a lift in? Figured you'd be with Bryce." I mean, yeah, normally, but with Bryce, I gotta constantly load and unload plates between sets. It's just kind of a hassle. Marcus let out a real laugh, the first one in months. "You know we have to do something about this team, right? Look, I played my heart out every Sunday. I'm not sure what more I can do at this point. Man, when are you gonna learn that even when the clock hits 0, you don't stop playing the game?" "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the 51 other guys in the building. We came here chasing a ring, so did they, and right now, every single one of them feels like they're invisible. That's on us." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying we stop worrying about the stats and the spotlight and we start winning the locker room first, and everything else will follow." It wasn't a complicated plan, but it was the right one. And ahead of game day, the two knew exactly what was on the line. When they took the field against the Saints, something in the air felt different. Jalen was the first to flip the switch. He came out running with everything he had, breaking tackles, dragging defenders, fighting for every extra yard like the season depended on it. And after every play, he was the first one back to the huddle, hyping up the linemen who made it possible. And when the offense reached the goal line, he convinced coach to let Rico have a carry that would have otherwise been his. The sideline erupted erupted and something had definitely shifted. Marcus watched from the sideline and felt it too. When the defense took the field, he made a decision before the very first snap. No hero ball today, no freestyling, just football. He fought the instinct to blitz, sat in his zone, and it paid off. And by now, the entire team was playing looser, more confident, like they could feel the difference too, and chief among them was Bryce Young. Jalen didn't care that it meant fewer touches for him. He and everyone else were just happy to see their QB balling out. Late in the fourth, with the Panthers searching for the lead, Jalen stepped directly in front of a free rusher, took a brutal hit, and bought Bryce just enough time to find the end zone. The O-line helped him to his feet, giving him the acknowledgement he'd been searching for all year. And when the defense hit the field again, Marcus settled into his zone, trusted in his team, and watched the pass rush get home. Then on the next play, he trusted the secondary, and they came through with a bat down, and that was the game. And yeah, it was the 1-8 Saints, the worst team on the schedule by a mile, and everyone in the locker room knew it, but that wasn't the point. The point was what it felt like in there afterward. No side eyes, no whispered conversations. Game balls went to the O-line, to Bryce, and to other veterans who'd been invisible all season. Jalen sat back and watched the praise get spread around, and he loved every second of it, and Marcus would never admit it out loud, but he kinda liked it too. And later, as the locker room cleared out, Marcus found Bryce at his locker. Bryce looked up, definitely not expecting the company. Marcus stood there trying to get words out that didn't exactly come naturally to him. Look, what I said after New England, that wasn't leadership. That was frustration, and you didn't deserve it. Bryce stayed quiet for a moment, still in shock. Hey, you weren't wrong though. I've been playing bad football. Yeah, but that's not the point. The point is, I made it harder for you, and I'm not about that anymore. Marcus turned around, hit the exit, and felt like an elephant had just lifted itself off his chest. He and Jalen had entered the league chasing a ring together, and in the midst of a lost season, they were both learning something new. There were 53 men on the roster, every single one of them chasing the same dream, and none of them were getting there alone. In the weeks that followed, Carolina went on something the league hadn't seen coming. With the locker room finally connected and the Twins playing the best football of their lives, the Panthers started winning.
This isn't the same Carolina team we saw in September. I don't know what it is, but something changed in that locker room.
I've been a Panthers fan my whole life, and it has never felt like this.
Jalen Knox is making people look very foolish for letting him slide to 17.
My son just told me he wants to be Marcus Knox for Halloween.
What had looked like a lost rookie year was reshaping itself into something nobody had predicted in September. A real shot at the division and a real shot at the playoffs in year one. But Carolina desperately needed a measuring stick, a true test, and they got one. The 8-3 LA Rams came to Charlotte loaded with talent at every level, a team most analysts had penciled in as Super Bowl contenders before the season even started. And from the opening snap, Marcus was everywhere, meeting Kyren Williams in the gap on back-to-back plays, burying him face first in the turf before he could find any daylight. The secondary closed out the drive, picking off Stafford, and then Jalen and the offense did their part. Carolina shocked the league that afternoon, and when the final whistle blew, the Panthers found themselves with a new label, dark horses. But not everyone was buying it. Up in Tampa, the Buccaneers still sat atop the division, and one quarterback in particular had some thoughts when a reporter brought up Carolina's momentum.
Carolina? I don't really see it. Look, they're a fun team to watch with a cute defense, but let's not pretend they're a threat.
Just like that, Baker's words circulated everywhere, spreading across the league within the hour. And Marcus was sitting in the film room when it hit his phone. He watched it once, then twice, and then probably 100 more times. Each playback making him angrier than the last. And when Jalen saw the look on Marcus's face, he knew exactly what was coming. Because he had seen that look before, and every opponent who'd ever put it there had come to regret it. Coach Canales urged them both to block out the noise, focus on finishing the season strong, and let the football do the talking. Jalen was on board. He'd always been the one who could compartmentalize and channel things smoothly, but Marcus didn't work that way. He never had. He didn't do blocking out noise, he let it in and let it become something he could use. And with two matchups against Baker and the Bucs still on the schedule, the path ahead was clear. The road to the playoffs ran through Tampa Bay. But before they got there, Carolina had one more stop, New Orleans, and one sentence is all we need for this one. The Panthers went in, handled their business, and came out the other side 8-6 with 3 weeks left and everything still in front of them. Following the contest, if you could even call it that, it was Coach Canales who stepped up to the podium with something to say. He didn't mention Baker by name, but he didn't need to.
Panthers are here. Season started slow, but that's over. This team's playing different, acting different. Talk is cheap, and we'll set the record straight these next few weeks.
And every reporter in the room knew exactly who those words were aimed at. 8-6, 3 weeks left, 2 games against Tampa still on deck, the division title was alive. The playoff picture was taking shape, and standing directly in the way of all of it was a quarterback who had called their defense cute on national television. Jalen wanted to win, wanted to prove something, and show the league this team was the real deal. Marcus wanted all of that too, but Marcus also wanted Baker Mayfield to remember his name for the rest of his career. He watched the clip one more time before turning off the lights in the film room.
They're a fun team to watch with a cute defense, but let's not pretend they're a threat.
When game day finally arrived, the atmosphere was different. The stakes, the tension between the two teams, it didn't feel like a regular season game, it felt like playoff football 3 weeks early. Jalen and the offense were the first on the field, and he cracked the day wide open with a massive run. Then Bryce found him again with an easy dump off in the end zone to put Carolina on the board first. A statement opening drive. But the entire time, Marcus watched from the sideline, Baker's words cycling through his head on repeat, his anger growing hotter with every passing second. He was done watching, he wanted the field. And when his time finally came, he had a free lane right at Baker. He flew down full speed, but Baker fired it quick and hit Igbuka over the middle before Marcus could get home. The secondary couldn't recover, and as the Bucs walked in for an easy touchdown, Baker shot a look to Marcus on his way to the sideline, a look we've definitely seen from Baker before. The next time the defense took the field, Marcus channeled some of that fire into something useful. Baker fired one over the middle, and Marcus was there to level the receiver. And at that moment, Baker's game plan was clear. Get the ball out quick, keep the secondary on their toes, and don't give 43 a chance to wreck the game, and it was working. Carolina's defense tried to adjust, but it was obvious Marcus was fighting a different battle inside his own head. He was too hesitant when he should have trusted his instincts, and too aggressive when he should have stayed patient. Tampa walked in for another easy score, and now the game completely unraveled. The Bucs dissected Carolina's defense with ease, and when Jalen and the offense hit the field, Tampa had answers for them too, taking Jalen completely out of the game plan, eliminating the one thing that had been working for Carolina all season. No sugarcoating it, Tampa looked like the better team from the first quarter to the last. They recovered the last-ditch onside kick, handed the Twins their loss, and Baker wasted no time rushing to the podium.
Man, I can tell that 43 really wants to get his hands on me. Either he's slow or I'm just fast. He'll have to try harder next time around.
And if you thought Marcus was mad before, he just reached a whole new level. A rematch was coming, but first, all attention shifted to Seattle, a game Carolina desperately needed, not just for their playoff hopes, but for something else. Proof that the loss to Tampa hadn't completely broken them. Going into it, Jalen could see his brother's head was still partially in last week, hanging onto Baker's post-game words, and he was ready to carry the load if Marcus needed time to find himself again. He and Bryce connected early, an improvised route over the middle, flashing their chemistry and putting the Panthers in front. Now the question flipped to Marcus. How would he respond? And when the defense took the field, we got our answer pretty quickly, but it wasn't the one everyone was expecting. Not a sack, not a pick, but 3 consecutive routes covered flawlessly, back to back to back. And then, with nowhere to go, Darnold stepped up and Marcus crashed down for the hit to end the drive. No freestyling, no hero ball, just discipline. And that play wouldn't light up the stat sheet, but it might just be the best thing Marcus Knox has done all season. Carolina got back in the win column, keeping their playoff hopes alive, and now everything came down to week 18. Win and the season continues. Lose and it's all over. Both Twins were determined not to get swept by Tampa. They'd never live it down if they did. And before kickoff, Coach pulled Marcus aside, urging him to play smart, not angry, to play with the same discipline he showed against Seattle. Marcus agreed, but Coach could see it in his eyes. He was already seeing red, and this time, no one was talking him down from it. Jalen took one look at his brother warming up on the sideline, and even though they were twins, who quite literally had the same face, he didn't recognize him. The defense was the first on the field, and Marcus was moving like a man possessed from the opening snap. He read the screen from a mile away and flew downhill, hitting Bucky Irving like a freight train. But while Marcus was making his presence felt on defense, the offense was coming apart at the seams. Bryce threw a duck right into coverage, and it went 97 yards the other way for a Tampa touchdown. Then on the very next drive, he got suffocated in the pocket, went down and coughed up the football, and the Bucs recovered. Halfway through the game, it felt like Tampa was about to cruise to another comfortable win. But Marcus hit the field and paid the scoreboard no mind at all. He only had one mission. On his next snap, he blasted through the line, crushed Baker in the end zone, and knocked the ball free. The Panthers scoop it up for a huge defensive touchdown. The sideline erupted, and as Jalen slapped his brother on the helmet, Marcus said, "I'm just getting started." And he meant it. On the very next series, he came flying through again, smothering Baker, forcing another fumble and another Panthers recovery. 2 possessions, 2 forced fumbles. The Marcus Knox that had struck fear into every offensive coordinator on draft night was on full display. But coming out of halftime, it was clear Tampa had made their adjustments. They committed to the run, got Baker moving moving outside the pocket and kept the ball away from 43 as much as the game would allow. It worked well enough to march the length of the field and reclaim the lead on a chip shot field goal. And now, an offense that had struggled all afternoon needed to answer. Right on cue, Bryce fired it down the seam into a tight window, and Ted McMillan climbed the ladder, reeling in the spark Carolina had been looking for. Trying to ride the momentum, the Panthers hand it to Jalen at the 1-yard line, but he gets blasted in the backfield for a loss. They're forced to settle for 3, and as Jalen jogged to the sideline, he couldn't even look at Marcus. 2 turnovers from Bryce, a TFL on what should have been an easy touchdown. He felt like he was letting the defense down, letting his brother down. Marcus walked past him, tapped him on the helmet, and hit the field without a word. And what followed shocked everyone. Baker and the Bucks continued leaning on what was working, dinking and dunking their way down the field, bleeding the clock, and keeping the ball as far away from Marcus Knox as possible. Marcus was doing everything in his power to hold the line, knowing full well that field goal range meant the season was over. But the defense bent and bent and bent some more. Tampa marched to the goal line, and now with just 30 seconds left, 0 timeouts, backed up in their own end zone, Carolina needed a miracle. Baker took the snap, stood tall in the pocket, looking for the dagger. Marcus Reddick-Buka cutting across the field, and off pure instinct, he jumped the route and snatched the ball right out of the air. 96 yards of green grass in front of him, and absolutely no one was catching the freak with 4.3 speed. A pick 6 for Marcus Knox, and the Panthers take the lead with 16 seconds to play. The stadium was stunned, and the Carolina sideline lost their minds completely. Baker got the ball back just in time to heave up one final prayer, and Marcus snagged that one too, just to make sure the message was received. 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 2 interceptions, 1 pick 6. Marcus Knox had single-handedly dragged the Carolina Panthers into the postseason. The locker room erupted. The entire team, vets, rookies, everyone was cheering loud for Marcus, who just soaked it all in. And for the first time since draft night, everything felt possible again. The Panthers were in the playoffs in year 1 of the Knox Twins era, and in the middle of the celebration, across the room, Jalen was quiet. He'd just watched his brother put the team on his back and carry them into the postseason single-handedly, and in that moment, a thought had settled in that he couldn't shake. Tampa had figured him out completely. In the most important game of the season, they'd taken him out of it entirely. And Carolina had needed a miracle on the defensive side of the ball just to survive. The playoffs were a week away. Better teams, smarter game plans. If Tampa could neutralize him, what would a playoff defense do? Marcus had just announced himself to the entire league, and now it was Jalen's turn, and he wasn't sure he was ready. The wildcard round was here, and for the first time since the national championship, the Twins weren't just playing for their team, they were playing for something bigger. But standing in their way, looking for a measure of revenge of their own, was Matt Stafford and the Los Angeles Rams. Coach Canales pulled the team together before kickoff, and there was no underselling what this moment meant. The organization needed this. The city needed this. And nobody in that building carried the weight of those expectations more than the Twins. Jalen and the offense were the first on the field, and immediately the moment got the best of him. He took the first handoff, got crushed behind the line before he could blink, and fumbled the football. The Rams recovered easily, and Jalen stumbled to his feet, feeling equal parts dazed and sick to his stomach. Every fear he'd carried into the playoffs confirmed on the very first touch. Marcus and the defense went to work, hunting a turnover of their own. They couldn't get it on the first try, but on third down, the Panthers came up huge, stepping in front of a Stafford pass and snatching their first takeaway of the game. And back out trotted Jalen, still shaking off the fumble, but determined not to let it define the night. He took the first handoff of the drive to the outside, found a crease, and turned it upfield for a 30-yard gain. A sign that maybe, just maybe, Carolina's offense was capable of finding its footing. But Jared Verse had other ideas, coming off the edge untouched and burying Bryce before he could find his first read. Panthers came up empty, and the game was still waiting for someone to crack it open. Well, Marcus answered the call. Reading Stafford's eyes from the snap, he stepped in front of the tight end and snagged the pass right out of the air without breaking his stride, and nobody was catching him back-to-back games with a pick 6. All of a sudden, when it came to Marcus Knox, the term generational seemed wholly inadequate, and his energy spread fast. On the very next drive, the defense stepped in front of another Stafford pass for their third takeaway of the night, and the Carolina sideline lost its mind completely. Jalen just watched, and the feeling in his chest was eerily similar. His brother and the defense carrying the weight of another game while he struggled to find his footing. He'd spent half the year feeling like this, and he wasn't about to let the playoffs be more of the same. He went back out there and fought for everything he could get, and on third and goal, he leaked up the seam, reeled in a pass from Bryce, and crossed the goal line for Carolina's first offensive touchdown of the night. Finally, a sigh of relief for Jalen. But the Rams weren't done. Stafford found a wide-open Devontae Adams for LA's first points of the game, and Carolina tacked on a field goal before the half expired. They went into the break with a 2-possession lead, a lead nobody had predicted, but nothing about it felt safe. McVay made his adjustments at halftime, and the Rams came out of the break moving the ball with a different kind of confidence, methodically picking apart Carolina's defense, forcing Marcus to overcommit. In the red zone, he jumped for the pick, but Devontae Adams beat him to it, fighting his way across the goal line to cut the lead to 3. Carolina's offense stayed hot and cold throughout the third quarter, explosive 1 second and non-existent the next. They settled for another field goal, and even though points were points, Jalen knew it wasn't going to be enough forever. And he was right. In the fourth quarter, Stafford found Atwell along the sideline, and once he turned upfield, there wasn't a Panther alive who was catching him. The Rams took the lead by 1, and for the first time all night, Carolina was behind. The offense dug their heels in, and Jalen fought for every yard he could get, absorbing hits and refusing to let the drive die. Coach made the call to ride him to the finish line, carry after carry, trying to bleed as much time off the clock as possible. But LA caught on, and when Coach dialed up a screen on third down, Jalen was buried the moment the ball touched his hands. Panthers settled for the go-ahead field goal, and as Jalen jogged off the field, the entire sideline held their breath, wondering if they just left Stafford with enough time to steal the game away. Marcus and the defense took the field, fully expecting a battle, but on the very first snap, Stafford called game, gifting Carolina their 4th interception of the night, and just like that, the Panthers had punched their ticket to the divisional round. The locker room afterward was louder than it had been all season, and they had every right to be. After the first few weeks of the season, nobody was thinking playoffs, let alone a playoff win. But as the noise filled the room, Jalen just sat there, with a thought growing louder and louder in his head. The defense had generated 4 turnovers, and Carolina had survived by just 2 points. It didn't take a genius to see the issue. Did the Panthers win this game, or did Matt Stafford lose it? The offense had a problem, and with the divisional round coming, there was no room to hide from it. Jalen wasted no time doing what he'd been coached to do since high school, put the bad game behind him and focus on what was next. And what was next was the most difficult test this team had faced all season. Waiting for them in the divisional round were the Detroit Lions. The number 1 seed rested off a first round bye, playing at home, basically every advantage the playoffs had to offer. Carolina was walking straight into the best team in the NFC, and maybe even the league. Before kickoff, Coach pulled Jalen aside, and as he sat down, he already knew what this was about.
Look, Jalen, it's no secret this offense has been stagnant. We've already talked with Bryce, but you need to be the leader out there. Our defense can't carry this thing forever. Understood?
Jalen didn't argue. How could he? He knew he hadn't been himself since the season ended, and if the Panthers were going to survive Detroit, he had to get out of the passenger seat. And later in the tunnel, ready to take the field, Marcus pulled him close and told him what he needed to hear. Jay, this is what we came here for. Go be you. The offense took the field first, and from the opening snap, they were trying to send a message. Jalen took the first handoff to the edge for a clean 8-yard gain, and then something nobody in Ford Field saw coming. Bryce climbed the pocket and heaved a bomb downfield right into the hands of Xavier Legette to move Carolina down to the 12-yard line. Playoff Bryce Young had arrived. But as had been the story of these playoffs, the Panthers' offense hit a wall. Knowing they couldn't afford to leave points on the board against the number 1 seed, Jalen leaked out of the flats on third down, turned the corner, and fought his way to inches from the goal line. From there, he punched it in, and the Panthers struck first in the divisional round. Jalen let out a quiet breath, a small relief, but he knew the battle would only get tougher. The Lions' offense wasted no time reminding everyone why they'd earned that top seed. Marcus got erased from the play entirely, and Jahmyr Gibbs rattled off a massive gain almost effortlessly. But Marcus settled in fast. When Coach told him to go get Goff on third down, he did exactly that, killing the drive and holding Detroit to just 3. Carolina came up empty on their next possession, but Marcus was locked in now. He broke up a pass over the middle, then filled the gap on the next snap like a missile. Everything was clicking. Until it wasn't. Gibbs broke wide open on the wheel route and took it all the way in for a Detroit touchdown. The Lions took the lead, and Marcus got an earful on the sideline while Bryce and the offense tried to answer. But Detroit wasn't about to give up another deep shot, and after several incompletions, Jalen understood it was time to take matters into his own hands. Literally. He put his head down and went to work, carry after carry, absorbing contact, refusing to go down without making Detroit feel every hit. The chains kept moving, and Carolina was able to tie the game with a field goal before halftime. Tied 10-10, it was anyone's game. The Lions came out of the break looking like a completely different team. Marcus, meanwhile, looked nothing like the player he'd been all year. Gibbs was consistently getting the better of him, and Goff was attacking his coverage, dotting him up for another Detroit touchdown that put the Lions back in front. And Ford Field was louder than it had been all afternoon. Carolina's offense continued fighting itself, Jalen was getting bottled up on nearly every snap, and Bryce couldn't find a rhythm. And now, the doubt began growing louder and louder on the Panthers sideline. Maybe the magic had finally run out. Maybe the story ended here. The Panthers forced a fumble they couldn't recover, and I don't know who this is, but he needs to be off the team tonight. 5 minutes left, season hanging by a thread, still trailing by 7, Jalen looked at his brother. It's on us now. Marcus held his gaze, staring into his brother's eyes before responding. No, it's on you. Go get it done. Jalen put one foot in front of the other and started willing the offense down the field. One long run, then another, bouncing off defenders, fighting for every yard and refusing to be brought down easy. He kept the chains moving, and with a 2-minute warning approaching fast, he took one more carry up the middle, bounced off the linebacker, and fell across the goal line for the game-tying score. And for the first time all night, Ford Field got a little quieter. But in the final 2 minutes, neither team could pull away. Detroit got the ball and went nowhere. Carolina got it back with a minute left and did the same. The Lions lined up for a 57-yard Jake Bates field goal to win it, and it's wide right. We are headed to overtime in the divisional. Overtime football in the playoffs was a completely different ballgame. Every snap could mean the season, and both teams were moving with a new sense of urgency. But Detroit seemed to have just a little more left. They started slicing through Carolina's secondary like butter, moving their way inside the 10-yard line and setting up what looked like a walk-off score. Marcus had been a liability for stretches of this game, and he knew it. Part of him felt like he had no right to even be on the field. But he was, and this is why. On 1st and goal, Goff stared down his receiver, and Marcus jumped the route, snatching the interception for the biggest play of his career. Season-saving, legacy-cementing Marcus Knox, you legend. Now, next score wins, and Jalen wasn't waiting. While everyone else on the field was running on fumes, Jalen found another gear entirely. He rolled off defenders, created plays out of thin air, and carried Carolina across midfield and down toward the goal line. Detroit tried to mount a stand, but Jalen kept coming harder and more determined with every carry. Nothing was going to keep him out of the end zone as he punched in the game winner. A walk-off touchdown for Jalen Knox, and the Carolina Panthers were going to the NFC Championship. Ford Field was stunned, and in the locker room, nobody could quite process what they'd just done. Nobody expected the Twins to be one win away from the Super Bowl, and honestly, neither did they. But now, it was right there, actually within reach. One more game, one more opponent standing between the Knox Twins and everything they'd worked for since they were kids. And you'll never guess who it is. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The bracket had barely been updated before a new Baker clip hit Marcus's timeline.
43 has a motor, I'll give him that. But that last matchup, I was a fluke. We won the division for a reason. I'm not concerned.
Marcus stared at his phone for a long moment. What more did he have to do to shut this guy up? All week leading up to the NFC Championship, Marcus moved through the facility in a quiet rage. The entire locker room was walking on eggshells around him, and Jalen could see exactly where this was going. So before kickoff, he pulled his brother aside. Marcus, can't you tell what he's doing? He wants you coming at him angry, off balance, and if you do that, the whole team's in jeopardy. Marcus cut him off. He knew exactly what was at stake. He would be just fine. When the Twins walked out of the tunnel at Raymond James Stadium, the noise hit them like a wall, boos cascading down from every level. The Tampa faithful had shown up today in full force. Nothing about this felt like it did in Week 18. This was different. This was the NFC Championship, and Carolina could feel every bit of it. Jalen and the offense took the field first, and early on, it became clear that Tampa had done their homework. Carolina wanted to run the football, and the Buccaneers knew it, which meant the Panthers were going to have to do something they'd spent most of the season avoiding. Let Bryce air it out. And Bryce rose to the moment. He stood tall in the pocket, delivered confident strikes, and moved the offense methodically into Buccaneer territory. With some clever play calling in the red zone, Jalen secured one over the middle and dragged 4 Tampa defenders across the goal line with him. Panthers struck first, and the boos only got louder. And out trotted Baker Mayfield, and across the field, Marcus Knox was already locked onto him. Marcus wasted no time setting the tone, filling the gap, and crushing Bucky Irving on the first play. But Baker was the real target, so Marcus waited for him to step up, leaving his zone uncovered in the process. Baker fired one over Marcus's head, and it's an easy completion. And down in the red zone, Marcus sees what he's been waiting for. Baker climbed the pocket, and Marcus flew downhill, hunting the hit he'd been thinking about all week. But Baker saw him coming, and one swift sidestep later left Marcus on the turf and Baker in the end zone. On the sideline, Jalen shook his head, watching everything he feared unfolding in real time. When Marcus came over, Jalen tried to calm him down, but Marcus pushed right past him without saying a word. With the leader of the defense outside of himself, the rest of the unit struggled to pick up the slack. Baker picked them apart methodically, completion after completion, attacking Marcus's coverage specifically. Buccaneers punch in another easy score, and on offense, Jalen was fighting like hell, trying to make up the ground himself. But trying to bear the weight of the game alone led to plays like this. The Bucs tack on 3 before the half, and Carolina was lifeless. The locker room during the break was the quietest it had been all season. Nobody was yelling, and nobody was trying to make adjustments. Everyone just sat there, feeling the season slipping through their fingers. Marcus could feel every dirty look being shot his way, and all the disappointment around around him. He'd carried this team to the NFC Championship, and now he was in the process of costing them a Super Bowl appearance. Jalen was right. This is exactly what Tampa wanted, and he'd given it to them freely. So out of the break, Marcus came out ready to be different. But Tampa had already built a rhythm that wasn't breaking anytime soon. They marched down to the goal line, but Marcus settled in. He stepped up in the gap to shut down Bucky Irving, then on 3rd and goal, he stayed patient in his zone, took away the easy completion, and let the rush get home. And even though the Bucs still came away with 3, it felt like a small victory for the defense. But on offense, still facing a 13-point mountain to climb, the run game was completely dead in the water. Carolina didn't have many cards left to play, but Jalen had never fought a battle that wasn't uphill. He made plays in the receiving game, made plays on the ground, whatever he needed to do, he found a way to do it, willing Carolina into the red zone for the first time since the opening drive. Then from 15 yards out, he followed some beautiful blocking from the line and crossed into the end zone, giving the Panthers the jolt of life they desperately needed. He ran straight off the field and directly up to his brother and told him, "We can do this, but I need you. I need my brother." Marcus looked at him for a moment and nodded. He took the field and Baker went right back at him, attacking his coverage like he'd done all afternoon. But this time the coverage was tight and Baker didn't see the defender underneath, and the defense came through with a pick right when they needed it most. The sideline erupted and Raymond James Stadium got a little quieter. With outstanding field position, Jalen took a screen pass on the very next play, followed the parade of linemen in front of him all the way to the end zone. A 14-point swing and now a 1-point lead. Carolina was alive in Tampa. For the first time all afternoon, the Buccaneer offense looked rattled. Marcus came flying in on 3rd down, burying Baker with the hit he'd been hunting since the opening snap. Tampa came up empty, and now the name of the game was keep away. Before the offense headed out there, Coach pulled Jalen aside and let him know this game was his to finish. Jalen began stringing together one strong run after another, demoralizing the Buccaneer defense with every bit of contact. Seconds began bleeding off the clock, and Tampa burned through their timeouts, desperately trying to get the ball back. The 2-minute warning came and went, and now there were no timeouts left to spare. One more first down, and it was over. Every single player on the field knew exactly who was getting the ball. Jalen took the handoff, hit the edge, cut back inside, slipped a tackle, and fell forward for the first down. And right then, the air was completely sucked out of Raymond James Stadium. The Panthers' sideline exploded as Jalen and the offense took victory formation. The clock hit 0, and Carolina had actually done it. They'd escaped Tampa with a 1-point victory, an NFC title, and most importantly, a ticket to the Super Bowl. It wasn't pretty. In fact, it was quite ugly, but Carolina had done something that nobody in that stadium, or in the league for that matter, could have ever pictured on draft night. The Knox Twins were going to the Super Bowl. The celebration in the locker room was unlike anything either of them had ever been a part of. And somewhere in the chaos, the two found each other. Everything they'd survived to get here, the draft, losing the locker room, the arguments between them, all of it had led to right now. And now there was only one game left to cement themselves into NFL history. But while the two prepared for the biggest game of their lives, the rest of the league was handing out trophies at a ceremony the Twins wouldn't attend. When you stop to look at their season by the numbers, nobody expected Jalen's year to look like this. Starting the season on the bench behind Dowdle, then taking over and never giving it back. 1,400 rushing yards, 16 touchdowns, and another 800 yards and 6 scores through the air. Marcus was the expected star, and he delivered exactly that. 23 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks, 4 interceptions, and 2 touchdowns. An absolute weapon at every level of the defense. When Coach pulled both Twins into his office, nobody was surprised to hear they'd won Offensive and Defensive Rookie of the Year. And as long as these two stayed together, Carolina's future looked genuinely bright. After delivering the news and wrapping up the meeting, Coach asked Marcus to hang back. There was something else to discuss. And before long, game day had arrived. And nothing, not even the national championship, not any playoff game, not the Heisman ceremony, came close to feeling like this. Jets flying overhead, fireworks booming in the sky, a stage they'd been dreaming about since they were kids in the backyard. The media was split almost down the middle. Half believed the Twins could carry Carolina straight to the top, and the other half thought this whole run was smoke and mirrors, and that Baltimore was about to expose every bit of it. And like always, Jalen blocked out every word, and Marcus harnessed it, used it to flip a switch somewhere deep inside himself. But the truth was unavoidable. The Ravens were a nightmare matchup. Lamar, Derrick Henry, a defense that had steamrolled everyone in their path. Baltimore had looked dominant all season, while Carolina kept surviving by inches. Jalen and the offense took the field first, and from the very first snap, he made clear he was here to fight. He took the opening handoff to the edge, shrugged off the first defender, juked to second, and turned upfield for nearly 20 yards. Then he came right back out and took another carry, rolling off a Ravens defender and moving the Panthers deep into the red zone, all inside the first 2 minutes of the Super Bowl. But Jalen wasn't the only one rising to the occasion. On the next snap, Bryce made a quick read, found his tight end, and Carolina struck first, sending a message to the entire Ravens sideline that this team had come to fight. Then Lamar Jackson walked onto the field. But Marcus had prepared for this. He stayed disciplined in coverage, trusted the assignment, and believed he'd taken away the easy throw, but Lamar tucked it and took off upfield, racing for a 35-yard gain before a Panther could even lay a hand on him. A disastrous way to start, but Marcus wasn't spiraling, not after everything this season had taught him. On second down, he followed Lamar's eyes from the snap, read Henry out of the backfield, and jumped the wheel route, intercepting the pass straight out of the air. He turned and outran every member of the Baltimore offense 60 yards to the end zone. A pick six in the Super Bowl. In the blink of an eye, Carolina's two rookie playmakers had flashed on the biggest stage in football, and the Panthers held a 14-point lead before the first quarter had barely begun. But Marcus knew better than to trust it. The Ravens responded quickly, methodically moving down the field. Lamar escaped up the middle on the next drive, putting a defender on skates before finally going down at the 1-yard line. Baltimore tapped it in, and just like that, the lead was cut in half. From there, the offense that had exploded on the opening drive went cold. Jalen was getting met in the backfield, Bryce couldn't find time to throw, and after a quick 3-and-out, the Ravens went right back to work. Marcus found ways to slow the bleeding, but Baltimore still chipped away at the deficit with a field goal. With halftime approaching and Carolina desperately needing to answer, the Ravens defense had clearly made their adjustments. Backed up to their own end zone, facing a 3rd and forever, coach wanted to play it safe, keep the ball on the ground and control the clock and get out of the half alive. But Jalen had a different idea. He took the handoff to the edge, raced for the sticks, and completely flattened Kyle Hamilton on his way past the chains for a fresh set of downs. Then on the very next snap, the blocking came together perfectly. Jalen hit the second level, found another gear, and didn't stop until 60 yards later he was standing in the end zone. An 11-point lead heading into halftime, and every Carolina fan in attendance was losing their minds. For a moment, it felt like this might actually be possible, but the Ravens didn't see it that way. Out of the break, Lamar floated one perfectly over the top of the defense to Mark Andrews, and after just one play, Baltimore was already knocking on the door. Marcus and the defense scrambled to adjust, but the Ravens had found their rhythm. No matter what the defense tried, Baltimore kept finding answers. Coverage was being exposed, tackles that should have been routine became big plays. The Ravens wore them down play after play and found the end zone again, taking the lead for the first time all night. Jalen kept the offense breathing, coming up clutch on 3rd and long with a sideline grab that moved Carolina into the red zone. But now, Baltimore was playing at a level this team had never faced before. They were suffocating, relentless, and refusing to budge. The Panthers were forced to settle for 3, and when the 2-minute warning came, the game was knotted, but the momentum had clearly shifted. Marcus and the defense took the field knowing exactly what they needed to do. And somehow, running on fumes, they held. Lamar couldn't put it away, and when the clock hit 0, the scoreboard hadn't moved. The Super Bowl was heading to overtime. Baltimore got the ball first, and Lamar looked as fresh as he had in the first quarter, while everyone else on the field was running on empty. He escaped upfield, putting the Panthers on skates and moving their offense into Carolina territory. The Ravens moved through Carolina's defense like butter, and when Derrick Henry fell into the end zone, the energy on the sideline changed completely. They'd survived everything the season had thrown at them. The losing streak, the locker room, the arguments, and right now, staring down a deficit in the Super Bowl, it felt like the story might not end the way they'd pictured it. And while the offense prepared to take the field, coach grabbed Marcus. Remember that thing we talked about this week? It's time. The offense took the field, and Marcus jogged out there with them. Lined up in the slot, the Ravens defense assumed he was just a decoy, a desperate attempt to throw them off. But when the ball snapped, Marcus released up the seam, and Bryce found him in stride as he hauled it in for a first down. The stadium had no idea how to react. With both twins on the field at the same time, the Ravens defense genuinely didn't know where to look. The defense that had suffocated Carolina most of the night was suddenly outnumbered in a way they hadn't prepared for. On 3rd and goal, with Jalen in the backfield and Marcus in the slot, Bryce took the snap and fired it immediately across the middle to Marcus, who caught it in the end zone. Touchdown Panthers. This game wasn't over. Now tied at 31, the Ravens were scrambling. Back on defense, Marcus in the pass rush got home on 1st down, then came flying across the formation to wrap up Ricard before he could turn upfield. Baltimore came up empty, and the path to the Lombardi was suddenly wide open in front of them. Jalen got them going with a tough run to the edge, rolling over the first defender and falling forward for extra yards. Marcus came back in and made a tough grab on the next snap. The Ravens defense was gassed, while both twins were finding a second wind. 1st down inside Ravens territory, Jalen took the handoff, weaved through traffic, followed his blocks, and got wrapped up as he fell across the goal line. The Carolina Panthers had won the Super Bowl. Jalen didn't celebrate right away. For a second, he just stood in the end zone, with the confetti beginning to fall around him. And in that moment, he was somewhere else entirely. Back in those interview rooms, being asked if it was immaturity. Back on draft night, watching teams pass him by. Back on the bench, watching Rico take carries that should have been his. Then Marcus hit him like a freight train, and the world came rushing back in. From there, everything was surreal. Confetti raining down, Gatorade flying, teammates flooding the field from every direction, and somewhere the entire city of Charlotte losing their minds at the same time. Then somewhere in the celebration, the Twins found the Lombardi. Marcus picked it up first, then immediately handed it to his brother. Jalen Knox had entered this league as the other brother, the guy who still couldn't escape the shadow, but he was finishing his rookie year as a champion. And standing at that podium, side by side with his brother, hoisting the Lombardi trophy in front of the entire world, a new overwhelming feeling began to grow. The NFL would never be the same again. Thanks for watching.